Conservation of biodiversity. Conservation of biodiversity by two methods. One is in situ conservation, second one is ex situ conservation. Today we discuss here from these two topics in situ conservation. In situ conservation is important conservation for the biodiversity. In situ conservation means the conservation of a species in its natural habitat and the maintenance and the recovery of viable population of species in their original place. In situ conservation mainly endemism places, mainly in endemism places. Endemism means own places, native places are also called local places. In situ conservation means the conservation of species in its natural habitat and the maintenance and recovery of viable population of species in their original place. In-Situ Conservation Monitoring by WCMC, World Conservation Monitoring Center. Up to September 2002, in India, 625 conservation areas are identified. From that 625, 92 are national parks, 492 are sanctuaries, 27 tiger reserves, 14 biosphere reserves, including these sacred groves and forest, lakes also there. So from that, first one is national parks. Up to September 2002, 92 national parks are identified in India. National parks are the small protected areas that protect wildlife and their natural habitat. These are managed by the government. The boundaries of national parks are clear and tightly guarded. Activities such as grazing, farming, encroachment, mean occupying or akramana, and private land rights are prohibited in national parks. No private or human activities are permitted in the national parks. There are currently about 104 national parks are identified in India. These cover 1.33% of the area in India. One of the example here is Cobalt National Park in Nainital. It established in 1936 in Uttaranchal in India. It is first national park in India established by British government as Hyali National Park. In 1956, the Cobalt National Park changed as Jim Corbett National Park by Indian government in the name of Jim Corbett, nature scientist. Some other national parks in other countries, Yellowstone National Park in USA, Royal Park in Australia. These are the national parks for the conservation of biodiversity. The next one, sanctuaries. Up to September 2002, in India, 492 sanctuaries are identified. These are mainly conserved the fauna. Fauna means wildlife. The sanctuaries are specially used to conserve an endangered species. If we didn't conserve that endangered species are reached to extinct, mean that life cycle is eliminated from the biodiversity. Example, tiger, birds. Wildlife conservation and development are done through wildlife projects. They cover 3.72% of the land area of India. Limited access to timber, fruit collection, and tourists without disturbing wildlife. Preservation sites must be established in accordance with Wildlife Act 1972. According to Wildlife Act 1972, the sanctuaries are maintains rules and regulations for the conservation of wildlife animals. Now in India, 553 sanctuaries are present. From that sanctuaries, Annamalai Wildlife Sanctuary in Tamil Nadu, Gana Bird Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Nagarjun Sagar Wildlife Sanctuary in Telangana, Chilka Lake Bird Sanctuary in Orissa, Eturu Nagaram Wildlife Sanctuary in Telangana. These are the important sanctuaries, known sanctuaries in Telangana. Next one, tiger reserves. Tiger reserves are also one of the sanctuaries, one type of the sanctuaries, but that sanctuaries mainly conserve only on tigers. Up to September 2002 in India, 27 tiger reserves are identified. These sanctuaries are specially used to conserve the tigers only. Wildlife conservation and development are done through the wildlife projects. They are means these sanctuaries also 3.72 of the land area of India. Limited access to timber, fruit collection, and tourists without disturbing wildlife. Preservation sites must be established to accordance with the Wildlife Act 1972. Now, in India, 51 tiger reserve sanctuaries are identified. One of the tiger reserve is Kaziranga Tiger Reserve in Assam, Nagarjun Sagar Tiger Reserves in Telangana, Kenny Tiger Reserves in Madhya Pradesh, Kawal Tiger Reserve in Telangana. Next, In-Situ Conservation Biosphere Reserves. Up to 2002 September, 14 biosphere areas are identified. Ecologically protected areas are natural areas that are protected by law and for multiple purposes, including borders. These were first established as tourist sites in various countries. At present, its main purpose is to preserve genetic diversity, tribal way of life, and wildlife. Tourists are allowed only up to the peripheral layers of the place. Tourists are allowed only up to these peripheral layers places. The ecological protected areas consist of three zones, namely core, buffer, and transition zone. Humans have no access to the core zone, and core space has protected or protection by laws. Limited human intervention is allowed into buffer zone. Buffer zone for the human intervention for the agriculture, for the different types of crops in the buffer zone. It is limited access. Many human activities are allowed into transition zone. Presently, there are 18 notified biosphere reserves in India. From that one is Nalamala Forest. See, it is biosphere reserve oral line. See, in these biosphere reserves, transition zone, buffer zone, core zones are there. Transition zones, especially for the human activities. They are also human settlement area, like establishment of buildings, factories, houses, like roads. These all activities for the human beings in the transition zone. In buffer zone, Limited access, limited intervention, humans are allowed into buffer zone. During the daytime transition, human beings are entered into the buffer zone for the cultivation of different types of crops. But during the night time, the human beings are compulsory enter into transition zone. They are not in the buffer zone during the night time. Below the buffer zone, core zone is present. Core zone is the completely center point or center part of the biosphere reserve. It is specially for the animals. Humans are completely not enter into this zone. Means in this core zone, human activities are completely absent, prohibited. During the night time, core animals, wild animals are enter into buffer zone for the food. It is the biosphere reserves rules laws. Example, Nalamala forest and sacred forest and lakes. Sacred forest lakes also one type of in situ conservation areas. One type of in situ conservation areas spread over an area of 39,063 hectares in India. It is estimated that there are about 4,215 sacred groves or gardens are present. Some biodiversity is preserved in our country due to the adaptation of religious values as orphans. Small forests are formed by the constructing places of worships or temples and conserving native plants and animals. Conserving native plants and animals in the worship or temple areas. The forest built near such place of worships temples are called sacred groves. To this, some endangered plant species are preserved in these sacred gardens. The largest sacred garden in our India is located Khasi Hills in Meghalaya state. And gymnospermic plant living fossil called Ginkgo biloba is still found only in the Kasian Buddha temple in the town of Tianmushan. It is the city of China in China. In ancient, the sacred forests were divided into three types. They are one is tapovanas. Tapovanas means rishis perform penance and have limited access to public. Second one, Mahavanas. Common people have no access, but kings have access to hunt of animals in Mahavanas. Third one is Sri Vanalu. Dense forest, places where deities roam. So deities roam in this forest. That type of forests are called Sri Vanalu. So no one access to this Sri Vanalu. Sacred groves plant is Jammi plant. Kachiopalri Lake in Sikkim. These are the in situ conservation areas. In situ conservation areas. In situ conservation sites in the biodiversity. The main concept that animals or plants are conserved at their own habitat places, their own local places, or own endemism places.